And good evening from Philadelphia. Frank here. If it's Wednesday evening, it must be UFO News Network Sunday, of course, obviously. Here we are again with another show this week. Unfortunately, my usual sidekick, Chant Hannah, can't make it tonight. Chant is out of gas. She basically is laying on the road somewhere on the side of the road in Phoenix, passed out, because basically she just ran out of gas for you, the fans. Going to the Phoenix Lights anniversary celebration Sunday, and then the show that we did last night, a record-setting 3 hours, and she just couldn't do it. So we're going to have to soldier on without her. Our guest, Rich Hoffman, knows that feeling. You've been a busy man over the last weekend yourself with the Scientific Coalition for Ufology Conference in Alabama. Rich, welcome to the show. Thanks for coming on. And we're going to get down to the post-mortem, and you're going to tell us everything that happened over this past weekend. Thanks for coming on, Rich.
Hey, I'm glad to be here, Frank. Thanks for having me.
Great, great. And let me ask you this. In your unbiased opinion, on a scale of 1 to 10, how did the conference go?
Well, I would probably say that it's at least maybe like about a 9.99999.
There we go. There we go. All right. All right. So, yeah, an unqualified success. And why don't you tell the folks a little bit about the Scientific Coalition for Ufology? You and Robert Powell and Morgan Bell got this baby going. A fairly recent development. It's only been within the last couple of years, I believe. So why don't you tell the folks all about how this organization came together?
Well, actually, I mean, me, Robert Powell, and Morgan Bell, and a number of others have known each other for many, many years. And we met each other through being connected to MUFON. I was the state director for Alabama for a long time, and Morgan, for example, was the state director of Florida. Larry Cates was one of us. That Larry was actually a great analyst. I think he was on the Science Review Board, as was a Carl Paulson, who was on that. Robert Powell was the director of research. And so for us, it's a situation where we've known each other for quite a while, and we would oftentimes compare notes on cases or something of that nature. And then the other thing is that we got to know each other as being fairly serious-minded individuals and having scientific backgrounds or something of that nature, and saying, well, okay, well, we'll work together on a lot of this stuff. So anyway, to make a long story short, what happened was there was a case that came to, I believe it was Morgan, from a Diana Chaviano, and she had made a contact with a pilot in Miami, Florida. And the pilot kind of like apparently had a discussion with her about having become some sort of like, he had some sort of like video. And the video was handed to him by a pilot that was on a mission in Puerto Rico. And this was, the case itself was April 25th, 2013. And it was like only about a month after that was when she was able to actually see that. And the pilot said, well, we'd like to be able to have this thing looked at scientifically. And I guess she pretty much tried to say, well, we can take it through MUFON. And the person said, absolutely not. In fact, what happened was the pilot made everybody on the team sign non-disclosure agreements so that we wouldn't, or else he wouldn't give it to us. And basically saying that we would not have that kind of a conversation, and we would try to see what we could do to, take it through scientific channels and do the right thing by that. And so, make a long story short, over a period of a couple of years, then, we started about a year later, or not even a year later, actually, around November of that same year. We started to form a team, and that team kind of got started to say, well, this is a pretty incredible video. And I don't know if you're seeing it, Frank, but it's of an object that's basically, it looks like it's coming from the water. It goes what appears to look like it's going across an airport.
Okay, yeah, let me pull that up now. Let me run that now. And obviously there's no sound, so you can keep going.
No, that's all right. And so the gist of it is that this object was seen by a Customs Border Protection aircraft. It was a Dash 8 aircraft that was taking off on a routine mission. And their mission is largely to look for like things like drug smugglers and that type of thing. And this was like 9 o'clock in the evening. And so the situation there was that they were taking off on their mission and they were cleared to take off. And as soon as they get up in the air, they happen to notice that there is a light, a kind of a pinkish red light object that is now coming toward the airport. And they were quite concerned and apparently had a conversation with the control tower, because it's like, why did you release us and why didn't you inform us about the air traffic? And so they basically did a wide sweeping circle of this object and went pretty much out beyond the shore, and then made a huge circle and came back at the airport watching this thing. And the control tower indicated that they had seen it as well, according to the witnesses we had. And then something strange happened, and the light went out. And at that point, the pilot in the Dash 8 then yells back to the radar technician in the back and the thermal imaging operator. It says, "All right, well, turn on the thermal imaging camera and let's see what this thing is and let's follow it," because they were thinking it might be a drug smuggler, and apparently drug smugglers might come in and low flying and then turn off their light to go do something. Well, anyway, but nevertheless, they've got this thing on thermal imaging camera, and the gentleman is now holding it in his hand manually and directing it and capturing this object and tracking it. And they proceed to do that for 3 minutes and 54 seconds as the object then comes across the airport. At one point, you can see that there's an aircraft that's on the runway. That was a FedEx plane that was basically held up and delayed for takeoff because of something that the control tower had seen. And then the object kind of like moves around, and it eventually appears to come across the runway. And we then see it kind of like heading north, and it goes by, there's a supermarket, and you see cars along a highway, and at one point it goes behind a telephone pole, which then helps us to get a kind of like a size that we can determine.
And what was the size you did determine?
It was generally 3 to 5 feet in diameter.
Okay.
And then what it proceeds to do is appears to go out to the shoreline, and then it makes a definite turn to the west, and the object then seems to go into the water. And then at some point you see what appears to be a white spot, as the camera operator is seeing that as well, because he's moving his camera and following it. So he's seeing that there's that white image in the water. And then you see eventually then the object kind of come up out of the water, and it appears to be like, if you would, skimming the water. And then it goes into the water again, and then, or something to that effect. Or no, it comes back up. The camera jumps back at a longer distance. And you next see the object, what appears to be, get really, really dark. And that, by the way, in thermal imaging, you can either have the camera set for white is dark or black is dark. And in this case, when you see it's dark, it's basically thermal heat, and it's hotter than the other areas. So this thing gets really hot, or hotter, and then eventually it splits into 2 identical objects, where then they're not perfectly identical. The thermal signatures are a little bit different, but then the one object then kind of like goes and it appears to disappear, while the other one hangs up, and then it kind of slows down, and then eventually goes in the water. And then you see then the camera operator, by this time the aircraft is about 9 miles south of the airport and is going on its routine mission, because it had to do its mission, which was more important, and it didn't expect that. But anyway, the object is now gone, and you see at one point you see the FedEx plane then going down the runway, or getting the taxiway and getting ready to take off. And all that, we did an analysis. We broke that 3-minute, 54-second video clip into 7,027 frames and analyzed the entire 7,000 plus frames, pixel by pixel, to look at, and to get an idea of everything from its shape, if we could, the way it looks in a 3D plot. We used a variety of tools. One of them is the Image J, which allows you to go and to do incredible stuff. In fact, it's used in medicine extensively, looking at cells and various other things. But
yeah, just to jump in with some math here, you're getting 29 frames a second then, basically.
Yeah, it was right around 29 frames a second. So with that being the case, we were able to actually then start to determine, more like, can we calculate speeds and various other things? And so you see the object at times, especially on the last half of the transit around from the appearance of the runway, if you would, to the water, when it goes then by some things, you actually get some distance information. And that you can now look at, again, and analyze the speed better. And so we were able to determine, like, for example, when you see it going into the water, and we did see splash, by the way. There was a splash of the object that we noted in Image J. And we also noted that the object was going in at about 110 miles an hour. And then as soon as it hits the water, it then kind of slows down the speed to about 85 or 82 miles per hour, and then gradually over a period of time, it keeps up with that 80 some miles an hour, and then eventually gets down to where toward the end it's only going about 40 miles an hour. But the average speed, if you would, was about that 80, maybe 80 miles an hour for the whole transit.
Okay. And when you first saw this video, what was your initial reaction?
Well, I think like many of us, I mean, especially when you're, you have to be very skeptical when you're doing any kind of ufology work. You tended to think, well, this looks like it might be, it had a tumbling appearance to it. So you immediately go to the thought of it being a balloon or something of that nature. And then, I think my initial take was that it's going to be something along the lines of a balloon. And then I think there were some other people that thought, well, maybe it's a drone. Maybe that's what it is. And then, so we kind of like, said, well, let's follow the data, if you would, and see where the data leads, which is hopefully what you do in science.
Right.
You follow the data and let the data determine that. So as we began peeling back the onion on this thing, and we spent almost a year and a half every week going through this, and then eventually writing our paper. Our paper is like 162 pages long, and we broke it into the physics of the whole thing, and we broke up how we did what we did. We were able to get radar that showed basically just prior to that. Apparently, we're not sure, but there was out in that very part of the water where this thing was allegedly coming from. There were about 40 hits of a solid target on radar.
Okay.
And we got.
How did you get the radar, and who did you get it from?
Oh, well, we filed FOIA requests, and we got it from the FAA. So, I mean, we got several pieces of data from the different radar stations there. We tried to get the military radar, which is actually at the end of the runway, and they weren't cooperative to provide that, of course. But I mean, it was an attempt, right? But
right.
But nevertheless, what we had one radar was able to give us, for example, the indication that we were able to get the transponder code on the particular target. And we looked at the transponder code, and we were able to identify, because we were trying to even confirm, is this a fake video? Is this, is that really a Homeland Security aircraft or what? So anyway, we got the transponder code, and we looked it up, and we found out that it was military frequency. And then, of course, later on, when we're doing our FOIAs and things like that, in fact, Billy Cox did a FOIA where, they basically came and said that it was their video. So we did get that kind of confirmation and everything else. But nevertheless, we got a very good return, 40 hits of an object that was out there doing incredible maneuvers and quick moves, between spots around that whole area. And then those all go away magically when, of course, they turn on the camera and now they're recording it coming in. So, you have to then say, well, are they connected? Is that really that object that was out there and now this is it, or what? We don't know. And just like that, we don't, what we began to do was to say, well, we found some interesting data. The data doesn't make sense. Well, how do you explain the split? How do you explain just what goes in the air 1 minute, the next minute it goes in the water? Is it really going in the water? We began working with a whole variety of sets of people. I was working with a professor at UAH, University of Alabama, Huntsville, an optical specialist. And we were, trying to determine exactly, what this was. We actually got a hold of we confirmed, originally we thought it was a FLIR, and it turned out to be a Westcam camera, and they confided into us that it was a Westcam, which is produced by L3. And we were able to then take a look at, what the camera data provided us in terms of how it operates. And we found out that it's in the mid-wave IR range. So we were able to get basically the understanding. It was not near infrared, it was mid-wave. And so that gave us a lot more information, and we were able to look at other things like that were in the mid-wave to get an understanding of thermal, which is very unique, by the way, Frank. And so we don't often get thermal, and so you have to start to understand that that's not visible. You're not looking at something visible. You're looking at basically the heat that's coming to that. We also determined the temperature of that, by the way.
Okay.
It was interesting how we figured out how the temperature on this object was. And you had to almost do it from the standpoint of looking at what are the object's temperature in the video. Well,
are you talking about like a Fahrenheit temperature or more of a color temperature in terms of photography?
It's in the context of the temperature of the heat, the Fahrenheit.
Okay.
So we were looking at you have to look at the color values. So we took the pixels. And we basically put them in a range that goes from 0 to 255, all the way from white, if you would, white up to a black, if you would. And
so 255 is above boiling.
Well, no, I'm not talking about temperature. I'm talking about we broke the pixel colors.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Okay.
The shades of gray, if you would.
Understood. Okay, you're talking about the color scale. Okay, sorry, I got confused there.
No, that's no problem. It's a little bit challenging to try to give this whole thing to you. But bottom line was that we broke it into 255 shades of, if you would, gray.
Okay. With 255 being white and 0 being total black.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And so then what you do is you take a look at objects that are actually in the video. Well, at one point, this object's going by cows. And another point, you can see it going by an asphalt road. Okay, well, guess what? You're able to actually find studies on the internet that gives you that temperature for a cow.
Okay.
Okay, so you can take a look at the color value for the cow, if you would, and match that with the object, right?
Got it.
So that's kind of like what you see. And so basically a cow, I think it basically ended up to being something like along the scale of a little over 100 degrees, maybe 104 degrees or something of that nature.
Okay.
And so that's pretty much what we saw at the darkest that it was. And the other point you'll see is that we've noted is that the center of the object was dark, and then as you got around the perimeter, it was a lighter color. So, and then the other thing you got to think about is what produces that tumbling effect. Is it the heat? It's certainly not the balloon per se. If it was a balloon, this is where you start to peel back the onion and you say, well, wait a minute. this is a balloon.
Right, right, right. And
You
this,
know,
again, this happened at night, so it's not going to be
yeah,
like a super hot day warming things up.
right, exactly. And so, and you have a full moon out there. This happened to be on a night when it was a full moon. So the moon comes and does play in on thermal imaging, and you have to factor that in. And there's a whole bunch of other things that impact it as well. So you got to take a lot of consideration when you do this stuff. And anyway, bottom line is that we started to go through and say, well, can we identify drones? Can we identify, is this a balloon? And you start to go through those various hypotheses to consider, what would account for it, and you come out scratching your head, if you would. Someone actually, later on down the pike alluded to there was some sort of a Project Tomahawk that was going in, which this thing has no resemblance to the thermal signature of a tomahawk. And then, there are strict rules that the military has, and I've read those rules, about what you have to do in order to fly into any territory, and certainly notifying the control tower you're going to come in is paramount.
Sure.
Flight safety is an important issue, and
Absolutely.
that type. And so, that became rather ludicrous. And then again, if you look at the thermal signature on this object in our study that we had, you'd say, well, wait a minute, I don't know anything at all that looks like this. And thermal can be pretty doggone clear at night. That's why you got it. This thing the camera itself can measure almost like 1/100th of a degree.
Okay.
Okay. And it's capable of seeing very, very far. And and then the other thing is that the actual Dash 8 Scott on the bottom of it, it does have radar, but it's way in the back, and it's not positioned to look at objects in front. It's meant to look at things that are in the water.
Okay.
Okay. So that one wasn't available to be able to look at either.
Got it.
But anyway, again, that's how this team came about, and this is what we did. It took over like a year and a half for us to do that. And then after we were done, we were like saying, well, I think, a lot of people, we published it. And of course, then MUFON got a little bit upset with us, as you can pretty well imagine, that we didn't let them know, but we were signed to these NDAs. Mm-hmm. And then things got a little bit squirrely after that. And the next thing, we became the enemy.
Okay.
And so we just decided that we're going to go off on our own and basically pursue this on our own as a group of scientists. And so now we've, created this organization, and it's basically got now something on the scale of about 42 people, 12 PhDs, a lot of very highly degreed and highly skilled people. Most of them are pretty awesome when it comes down to it.
Right.
That are all helping us engage in different projects and doing things like we just did the Nimitz review and everything else. And we're about to publish that. That's a 260-page paper.
Yeah, Robert Powell's had a beat on that case for long before the New York Times and the To the Stars Academy came calling. So he's been on this for quite a while.
He sure has. And so then naturally we all got hooked, and then we created a team to pretty much kind of like replicate what we did with the Aguadilla type thing, where we, spend time looking at the case. We did extensive interviews with a lot of the crew members. We did what we could with then like an analysis from the radar information. Now, we don't have radar, but we've got the radar operators indicating that this thing was dropping from ceilings like 80,000 feet down to near sea level and stopping. And
right.
And so what we did, for example, was to say, well, let's compute the acceleration and the velocity and see what would happen if you would to compute that, and started getting some incredible data from that, which we talked a little bit about.
Well, the G-forces would kill a human being.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, absolutely. We'd be a puddle. And then the other part of that is you've got an object that's coming down through the atmosphere. Well, you can imagine, the heating. I mean, we have to put like our aircraft, it's got to have all that, shielding and everything else to be able to withstand the temperatures that you would be going through. And you don't see that on the object. nothing apparent there. And then you also have situations like, the kinetic energy release would have been huge. So again, it's like one of those things where it's like, well, what kind of an object can do that, And we were pretty much just validating some of the things we had heard and doing a lot of checking with that. We got a lot of great information from, talking directly with Commander Slate, and what he saw in the other aircraft with Fravor, and so we just put all that stuff together in a report that basically summarized what we found, and we presented a good part of that here at the conference.
And you had a really good lineup. A couple names I don't really recognize, a couple I do, of course, but
Yeah.
One that really stands out, I think, when I hear somebody put forth an idea and I think, I wish I had thought of that, then
Yeah.
I think that's probably a pretty good idea. That was Philippe Alaris from the European Space Agency. What
Yeah.
he was proposing is sort of a reverse exoplanet search, I guess might be one way of looking at it, where he's looking at using some ESA satellites, or a group of satellites that are part of the Copernicus program. And he's looking to gather data from them to see if any UFOs can be spotted from that data. I thought that was a pretty interesting idea. I don't know if it's gonna happen. I see the little disclaimer beneath his little intro there that he speaks for himself and not the ESA. But I like the idea. Could you tell us a little bit about what he had to say? And
Yeah.
I got a feeling that you like the idea too.
Oh, I absolutely love the idea. I mean, and I know that a lot of us in the room loved it. One thing I just want to share with you in my opening monologue, if you would, I talked about the fact that back 55 years ago when I got into this thing, I mean, I didn't have access to a lot of. I didn't have a cell phone. I didn't have, I didn't even have a computer. I mean, and you barely even had something that was like a tape recorder. You were going around trying to do notes and stuff. So
Right.
I mean, we didn't have that. So for me, and I've been in one of those investigators that I've investigated, a lot, over 1,000 cases probably by now. But I mean, literally was out there in the field talking with witnesses, getting data. I was even while they were witnessing them, I was trying to get out there or pretty close to it, and would often miss it. But I'm right there at the scene, and I'm talking to 30 witnesses and saying, go into your room and don't talk to each other and draw what you draw, and doing that whole thing, right, Frank?
Right.
And so I didn't have any tools. I didn't have any things like that. Well, today. And this is where I was talking, even in my role in Deputy Director of Investigations and also with MUFON as well. And then I got into this Director of Strategic Projects, which was all about using technology. It's about the fact that we've got so much stuff out there that why aren't we leveraging that? So I kind of hinted on the fact that, if I go in my military job, if you would, over there, and I'm a defense contractor at the Redstone Arsenal, and I work for Army Material Command. So I can see that we're using tools that if it would be great if we had the money and we could do the wherewithal to be able to use out there in the fields to do the investigations. Well, the whole point of this conference was about somehow getting a group of these people that were on the base, talking to some ufologists and being able to come up with ideas. So that was my initial goal with this, right? And it was about getting scientists together and having these kind of conversations. Well, along comes, and by the way, I work with Philippe on the Center for UFO Studies UFO Data Project. And so we're trying to be able to get technology there. So anyway, Philippe mentioned this, wanting to come over to talk to us about using satellite data, and we may have this tool that we can use. And so he showed, for example, video clips of objects like aircraft taking off on the runway and that type of thing, where you can actually see that, and you can get a whole immense amount of data. And the fact that these are going to be satellites that are doing Earth observation and recording a lot of stuff, and are going to be very much available for you to take a look at as these objects or these satellites, and they're not going to be on a geosynchronous. They're going to be actually orbiting. So they're going to be orbiting the planet. So there's kind of a problem there in the sense that a lot of people were saying, well, what happens if I'm going to go back and see that there was a UFO on such and such a date at this location? Well, the satellite might not have been there because it's going to be going around the planet.
Right.
So that may be a problem. But the other part of this is that, and you know what I'm talking about. How many people how many times do you see this on the internet where somebody's out there looking on Google Earth and they come up with something, right?
Right. Oh yeah. There's a lot of odd stuff. It could be all sorts of things: debris, ice, lots of things.
Well, we might have, a lot of us that can actually help filter that and look at that stuff and maybe identify that and have that connect to a UFO case. And that might be where it's available to us. But it's just another way for us. And then there's cube satellites and various other kinds of things that people want to put up too. So.
Okay. And another gentleman who was appeared at your conference was someone who I had on the show, and I got the chance to talk to him, was Professor Kevin Knuth. And I know he's got some very interesting ideas about how it might be possible for an ET civilization, sort of a nomadic civilization, to come here. But looking at his background, doing some background research on him, I noticed that he has also put together a piece of software that analyzes this massive amounts of data that comes in from various telescopes and space telescopes that can sort of pour through that and look for certain signatures, known signatures of exoplanets. I'm wondering if it's possible that he might be able to develop the same type of software to look for UFOs in the data that these European satellites will be able to download.
Well, let's put it this way. He was extremely interested in Laris's presentation. And and the other part of this is that, I love Kevin Knuth. I mean, he was... what I see so often are some of these people that are just now getting an interest in UFOs, Frank. And so, their eyes are opening up a little bit, and they're saying like, "Wow," and he's had a lot of thoughts, and he said, "Well, I haven't really put this down anywhere on this relativistic interstellar travel kind of concept that I've got." So he did that, and it was fascinating as hell. In fact, everybody was like really excited about his presentation, and he was the last presenter. So it's like, wow, it's like, if you can keep everybody's interest in this whole thing, it's like, wow. And so it was fascinating, and I, to hear what he had to say. And so I'm hoping that he will share all that stuff, and I think he will. I look forward to working with him in the future. And it was just an amazing conference too, because what you had the night before was Robert Powell and Peter Reale were sharing the Nimitz information. And then he came along on the next day and is now then talking about that kind of like the propulsion. And we talked about propulsion systems and how problematic that is for us in the context of what we have now. And, and then we have the significant hurdles with, exactly time dilation and how and then you also have the shielding. Everybody wants to think that we're going to run out and go build these Alcubierre drives and put these things that are going to somehow warp space, and if you would, and then that's great. But often people have difficulty understanding if you're going to put a human in something, how are you going to shield that whatever that's generating that energy?
Right. Exactly.
And so this is all theoretical stuff. It's like not even going to be in any near time future at all.
Real quick, if I can jump in, going back to the time dilation, that is relates to the faster you travel relative to the speed of light, time slows down for you, but for everybody else, say back on the home planet, it remains the same. So if you're traveling around the galaxy, at close to the speed of light, even, the idea of getting to some far off planet, gathering some research and getting back home. Well, you might be able to do it in your lifetime, but by the time you got back home, everybody will be dead. Your civilization might not even exist anymore. Professor Knuth's idea sort of works around that in a very interesting way.
Yeah, exactly. And then, then he even brings up another interesting concept, that we would ultimately become nomadic, and large groups of people or aliens would be, if you would, or us or whatever it is, are going to, go out as nomads, and we would then go out together and then populate a planet or something of that nature. And then we would probably take off and split off into multiple directions there. And, again, go to the next planet or the next star or whatever you want to say. And then, and over a period of time, you've got these nomads that are going off in different directions. Now, the interesting thing about it was he said, that you've also got the situation of, let's say you wanted to come back to the home planet and it's no longer there, or it's
right,
gone.
Right, exactly. Your data's no good. We figured out a way to beat time dilation. Sorry,
Yeah, and then you have to factor in that, as you very well know, we're going through space. Our sun's not staying in one spot. It's actually going around the galactic plane as well.
Sure. I think about that a little bit in terms of time travel. A lot of folks seem to think, well, the time travel solution's a lot simpler. Well, if you want to travel through time, you got to travel through space, because I don't think anybody's going to be able to figure out how to get the the universe to hold still for you.
Yeah, precisely. And he's saying, like, when you come back and want to have a meetup, well, that's a little bit problematic. And then and then there's the problem of communication with each other, since, communication, you have to have that worked out. So how do you communicate? Because let's say, for example, if you're at a distant location, like right now, how long does it take for you to get a signal back to Earth? I mean,
speed of light, is it not? I believe it's the speed of light.
Yeah. So, I mean, it depends upon what kind of, if you're using a radio or if you're using something a little bit better than that. But I guess what I'm trying to get at, is even the speed of light. We're not. If you get out there in a distant area, you're talking about it takes light years for us to see some of these things, the stars or the light from some of the stars right now. And so, time is a very big thing. How you meet up would be problematic, and then it doesn't take much to if you're going in and reading what Mark or Scott Kelly put together in his book called Endurance. The impacts of him right now being out in space are pretty doggone bad. It's affected him physically, genetically, and a whole variety of other ways.
Yeah, he was up on the space station, what, a year maybe total, or in one shot, or something along those lines?
Yes, precisely. And when you read his book and he's written, and you'll hear about him. They were doing the twin study where his brother stayed down, and and basically they compared that. But he's had a lot of impacts health-wise to being out in space.
Yeah, and on top of that, I understand if they're up there in the space station for any extensive period of time, they literally have to exercise like fanatics. Just they're still losing, physicality, even if they do that. But they still have to exercise like fanatics, or else they pretty much wither up, I suppose, after a period of time.
Yeah, and one of the things that also Dr. Knuth mentioned, and we don't even think about, but if you're moving at these those incredible speeds, cosmic rays would come at you and basically kill you. I mean, basically, you're being hit by those things at that kind of speed. It's like, you have something where you're going along in a fast car and somebody throws something out at your window. I mean, you have that same kind of bullet experience from cosmic radiation and various other things you have to deal with. And I don't know. It's gonna, like I say, it's gonna take a long time before we get out there.
But despite all that, despite all the problems we know full well, and probably some others we haven't even considered, there's a lot of confidence there that at least maybe some of these UFOs are in fact ET, and some kind of extraterrestrial intelligence that has figured out how to beat the system, basically.
Yeah, I mean, you have to and I think that's what Dr. Knuth was also saying. It's like, you have to consider all hypotheses. And when you get into something like this, to explain objects out there that are being seen, and even like the Tic Tacs, if you would, I mean, you have to consider that as a plausible hypothesis, right? And you certainly can't ignore it.
Yeah. I think some of them are. I can't point to any one particular case and say that one for sure. I don't know, but boy, there's enough of them out there, and you probably know better than me, having looked at all the cases that you said you looked at. 1,000, and well, there's something to these cases. You know, all these people aren't lying, and obviously there's physical evidence to back up enough of them.
Yeah, and the other thing I want to share with you is that while I was in MUFON, I actually reviewed 70,000 cases. So
there you go.
You know, I did look at what they have in there, and we were looking for, you know, even they're the best cases that we could find to be able to go out and spend more scientific time, if you would. So
Right.
You know, again, it's like one of those things we're all like looking to be able to find an answer, if you would, and if these things are real, if they're not real, if they're you know. For all intents and purposes, you know, the Nimitz, and you know, let me go back to the Nimitz case, that object that's moving, is it really in our time and in our space? I mean, we don't know. I mean, does it have some sort of a gravitational dampers? Does it have that it's not impacted by that inertia? Does it have a life form in it? We don't know. Are all these things like drones? Are they merely surveillance vehicles from, much like we were sending robots to Mars? Right. Why wouldn't they do something similar? Like, you know, instead of sending people, just send surveillance craft to go out to the different stars and observe planets and figure out what the heck's out there, right?
Yep, absolutely. Now, you mentioned the Nimitz case now, and also you mentioned Robert Powell and your own involvement with MUFON for some time. One of my favorite cases, and I think, you know, criticize MUFON all you want. Well, some of you guys were involved there, I believe. I know Robert Powell was. I don't know if you were or not. But that Stephenville case, I thought that some great work was done on that. Do you know much about that case, and can you talk about that one a little bit?
Well, I don't know a whole lot about it. I know that was one of the cases that Robert spent a lot of time on, and he did get, you know, again, like going for radar data, and he talked with a lot of different parts of the military bases and various other things. And so it looked like, you know, it was definitely and clearly an encounter with something that was rather odd. And
well, that report, he got radar data, and according to him, and I believe it was Mr. Schultz, Glenn Schultz, if I remember the name correctly, in that report, 500 feet in diameter and 2,000 miles an hour. Is my memory getting a little foggy in my old age, or is that about right?
No, that's about right. And want to bring something up because you mentioned that as well. The Dr. Knuth had gone through and also compared some of the other cases where there's actually radar data and there's confirmation in terms of speed, and I thought that was rather interesting. And give me a second here, I want to give you this because you know, basically he took a look at some of the cases, like, you know, in the case of the Princeton, what did we clock the speed at? What the Bethune case, the JAL case, you know?
Yep. I know that one. I know the Bethune case too. That one, that's the one that goes back a little ways. That's early 50s, if memory serves. Okay.
Yeah, and so what you start to get there were like, you know, that was basically 2,150 Gs, the Bethune case. You got 1,400 Gs with the Princeton case. You got 365 Gs with the JAL aircraft, that object. 100 Gs being measured with Fravor. And you start to like put that into some sort of like context where you can say, well, if these objects are moving at those kind of speeds in a relativistic kind of like rocket equation, how quickly, if they were able to do that, those speeds, how long would it take them to be able to get to Alpha Centauri? Okay. And that's where he was like saying, well, here you got objects that are being measured at these speeds. Potentially you could get to, you know, let's say Alpha Centauri within maybe 10 days. You know, 10 days would have elapsed, if you would, for the people on board the ship.
Not bad at all. I could handle that.
Right. Or again, depending upon if it's the smaller one, which is like, for example, the JAL. Well, if you could take that, you know, you're talking that you might be able to get to Alpha Centauri in, let's say, 45 days.
That's more of a push, but it's doable. I think I could handle that too.
Yeah. So he gave us these kind of, you know, equations, and it's basically taking it from those cases that if those objects are being tracked at those speeds, and you look at those accelerations, well, then bottom line is that you're talking about something that's moving pretty quick. It could be somewhere else pretty quick too, right?
Got it. Got it. But what would the time dilation factor be with those? I mean, it's taken me, okay, 90 days round trip at that slower G-force level. Are any of my relatives going to still be alive when I get back?
No. No, I'm sorry. Sorry, Frank. Yeah,
sorry. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, you're going to be on your own, and you know, and God help us if we're going to be around here as a planet too. So but that's, you know, that's the problem you get into when you're talking about these kinds of things, when you're moving those kind of speeds, and about people aboard the craft, if you would, versus the people who are staying behind. And so he's did an excellent job of just, you know, pointing out to us that, you know, hey, look, if these objects are doing those kind of speeds, then they have the capability for interstellar flight. And oh, by the way, why wouldn't we consider that in the context that they are coming from somewhere else to here? Why do we have to rule out the ET hypothesis? And we always have to say, well, no, it's too far, which is what you hear most often.
Right.
Okay, and that's what science tends to tell you. So it was an interesting presentation, and I'm just relaying what he, kind of like what his premise was, and I thought he did a fantastic job, and everybody was very, very like, oh my God, I didn't even think about that.
Now, you also had Dr. Conley Powell, who looks like he talked a little bit more about how that might actually happen, the actual propulsion that might get you up to those kind of speeds and to make that sort of thing possible. Tell us a little bit about what he had to say and what you thought of all that.
Well, Conley did an excellent job of just basically talking to us about, you know, more of the context of where we currently are with our latest thoughts around propulsion, and less about the Alcubierre type thing, but more about, you know, we were sitting in a room where you see rockets all around, and we're still building rockets, right?
Right.
You know, and we're not using you know, the capabilities of like the Alcubierre. Those are all hypothetically at this point. And so what he tried to talk to us about was, like, even if you got like something like a thermonuclear propulsion system, and, you know, and how that would work. And he talked a lot about that type of flight. And, you know, what would that do for us? And so he was more in the conventional realm as opposed to that theoretical realm, okay? And so, again, it was a situation that he was saying that, you know, we should be able to, if we can get that right kind of speed, and we've got that kind of technology, that we would be able to make those trip times.
Well, yeah, well, we're hearing in the news now about that, getting men to Mars and all that. And I've got to say, even with current propulsion, even that would be a serious push, that we're going to need some kind of next. It's one thing to get landers and rovers and so on there, but even that, you talked about the astronaut, Mr. Kelly, and his health problems. You'd be hanging out in deep space for an awfully long time just to get to Mars.
Exactly. And so, you know, we keep coming back to the fact that working through all of the health challenges and the logistics, think about the logistics of trying to keep people fed.
Right. You've got to carry provisions.
Yeah. And so the problem there gets into the situation where, you know, it's easier for us to develop a system or something like that in the form of a remote vehicle without a human in it. And then to try to do it that way. But there's even problems you have to consider there, because when this was brought out to us in the conversation that we had, that mechanical objects fail and have will also go bad. So even if you took you know, a ship where it doesn't have a human in it, and you put it out and send it out into deep space, there's going to be problems with it, and it would actually end up failing and not work. And so you get what I'm saying? It's like there's a lot to consider. And so when we think about doing kind of like going out into space and stuff like that, there are tremendous hurdles of things that we can't even comprehend yet, that we're still trying to study, and we don't know what that's like, and the speeds of us trying to do this. And then you have these objects that are bounding around in our skies and have been doing it for a long time. And so it's a very interesting situation, and that's why we want to get scientists engaged in this conversation so bad that we can have these kind of discussions. How is it possible? How can you do that? And so the thrust of what I tried to do is to create a safe environment where they could get together and feel comfortable enough to have a conversation. And man, it came together sweet.
Got it. Real quick, Rich, I don't know if it sounds like you might have a loose connection in your mic. You're garbling up just a little bit.
Okay.
I don't know if it's your end or our connection or.
I'm sorry. But can you hear me now? Okay.
Yeah, it's still going a little bit. If you can say something again.
Okay, I'm going to try it again. Is this any better?
No, I'm not sure what's causing it, but we'll soldier through. That's fine. We'll just keep going. We'll just keep rolling. Okay. Yeah. Now,
can you hear me now?
Still getting the same issue.
All right. Well, hang on 1 second.
Okay. There may be a crimped wire somewhere along the way or something.
Is that any better?
Yes.
Okay. We're going to try it this way. We'll do some technical maneuvering here and change it. All right.
Okay. So far, so good.
Okay.
Let's see. Oh yeah, you've gotten rid of your headphones. I'm picking up some feedback. You're listening to me through the speakers now?
Is this any better?
Yes. Yeah, but I'm getting feedback. I'm hearing myself come through. Your mic is picking my voice up on your computer.
You gotta love technology.
Yeah. Right. So maybe if you get away from the computer to the point where.
Way of doing this here, a second. Let's try this. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you much better now.
Okay, let's see if this works.
Seems to be so far.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
I think we'll be good. I think we're good to go. Okay.
I apologize.
No problem. It's it's live. Okay, we're ready to go. Now, another fellow that you had on the speaking at the conference was Dr. Travis Taylor, the Rednecks and Rockets fellow, I believe. And how did that come about? And to be honest about it, his topic was one that might rub some UFO folks the wrong way, talking about alien invasion and such. So why don't you tell me a little bit about his appearance there?
Well, his appearance was absolutely the best, I think, and absolutely fantastic because you have to know Travis, and so. Travis is a local Huntsville guy, and I don't know if you know it, but like he's got 2 PhDs and 3 master's degrees. Hey, he's a kid that basically got started like I did, young age, and his dad was building the Saturn V's and the rockets over there at NASA, and he grew up just highly curious and is a very incredibly deep thinker. And an innovator, I would say, as well, because, I mean, what he's done for the military is very, how do I put it? He's right now, for example, building a lab off of the arsenal right now, Redstone Arsenal, that is doing projects in quantum entanglement. And so very forward-thinking, very much into the sciences, very able and eloquently and simply able to communicate the sciences to you. I think he's been doing some like professor type work or something like that and teaches.
Right. Now, let me jump in really quick. You mentioned the quantum entanglement, and quantum entanglement to what end? What's he looking to do with it?
That I don't know.
Okay.
Many of the things that he's been involved with, because he's worked, like right now he's working at Space and Missile Defense Agency, and that's underneath the Army umbrella, and he's worked for a lot of others over at the base with NASA scientists and stuff like that. And he's just, one of those guys that knows science to the top and bottom and can do incredible things and makes things happen. And so all I know is that he shared with me that he was doing some sort of lab work in that. And then the other thing is that he's got clearances that go out the door. So I'm sure that, I'm sure that, I got probably the Reader's Digest version of what he was doing anyway. But he's also involved, and I don't know if you know this or not, but he's written like probably, I don't know, my God, I was like 20 books or something like that.
Okay.
He's an author.
I haven't read that many books, so yeah, I'm impressed.
Well, and then he is also a filmographer. I mean, he helped produce. Right now, he's doing the Ancient Alien show, and he's also doing that. What is it, Curse of Oak Island or something?
Oh, he's involved in that too. Okay.
Oh yeah,
I didn't realize that. Okay. I knew he was on Ancient Aliens, but didn't know about the Oak Island.
So they use him for the science aspect, and he's basically engaged in that. He's been engaged in a lot of different shows. There was I think a National Geographic show that was called When Aliens Attack or something like that.
Right.
And, let me come back and just share with you, because it's like, when people looked at the topic they was to do, like aliens or invasion or something of that nature, let me clarify why that was very appropriate in the first place. We are talking about sitting outside a military or a military facility here, right?
Right.
And the hope was, and again, even if you look at the context of the ATIP program, it's about threat, right?
Right.
So when you talk about threats and you talk about national defense and you talk about defense, then you have to consider that we have to defend ourselves. And so apparently a number of years back, he got somehow engaged in basically looking at, he was telling a story. It was like something along the line of like, he was talking to some military people and they kind of like, he said, well, if we're going to do asymmetric warfare with something unknown, we need to get into asymmetric warfare. And I'm not saying this probably right, but I'm trying to give you the gist of it. That basically he pops up and says something about, well, what happens if we get attacked by aliens? And the military officer said, okay, well, we need to think that out,
Right.
and so basically, and we do this a lot, we put together war plans and war scenarios, and so he was the one. He got together with another individual, I guess, and they started to get a team together and did the whole, how would you do this? What would you do? And how would you? And they put the science behind it. So, even looking at our current capabilities at the time into saying like, well, what are you going to do? Move guns around? Do you think our guns can do this? Do you think? And that's the nature of Travis Taylor, because if you look at him on Rocket City Rednecks, that show was on for a couple of years. It was about him, some friends over at the base. His dad was in it, the rocket scientist, and he would do things like, well, let me show you how you can make a submarine out of everyday stuff.
Okay.
So he would then take everyday stuff and make it into a submarine that would work. Or he would, how can you make a rocket? Let's go make a rocket, and so they would do that out of just, going to the Piggly Wiggly or something like that, and getting stuff and, using stuff in their garage. So the bottom line is the show got very, very creative, but that was his engineering kind of like mindset to be able to use simple materials, and it shows off his capabilities and his strengths. So this is about, when aliens attack was about, well, what would we do and how would we fight the fight? And he shared that with us in this story, which was absolutely hilarious at times. And he was talking about, he calls it Fermi's, not paradox, but Fermi's blunder, and covers the fact that, he was wrong, basically. Right. And his calculations and his thinking. And so he shows us where he went wrong. He calls it Fermi's blunder. And so that's, we learned a lot from just that and why that's a problematic kind of equation. He has his own equation on a lot of other different things. And just a very forward thinker that it kept you enthralled. Okay.
Got it. All right. So last but not least, I think I've discussed everybody. I don't think I missed anybody that you had at the conference except one, and I'm going to bring him up. The guy that everybody wanted to hear, excuse me, the guy that everybody wanted to hear, Luis Elizondo. So tell me a little bit about how you got him for the conference in the first place, and how did everything go?
Well, originally we were going to have a Dr. Silvano Colombano. And
that would have been a good get.
Yeah, I mean, we were trying to get him because he works at Ames Research, and he would put out that great paper that was basically talking about that there are potential. We should be focusing on UFOs and things like that. So, and then you probably saw what happened to him. He was on the media, and the next thing you know is he kind of like was shut off, and he said, "Well, I can't come." And so then we were left without a keynote, and I got to thinking about it. And I said, we were kicking around, well, who could we get that kind of like has a military kind of like background, because we're trying to have this outside of the arsenal, and who would be meaningful to the people that we were having. And well, why wouldn't you have somebody like Lou Elizondo, who basically was in charge of the ATIP program, and to talk about the very things that we're trying to talk about. And so we got, I think Robert got a hold of Hal Putoff, and then Hal eventually put us in contact with Lou. And then we asked if Lou was willing to come out, and we made arrangements for that to come. And then lo and behold, Hal came out as well.
Yeah, he was there. He didn't present, but he was there as well.
Oh man, I mean, I was sitting in just heaven. I mean, God, and so for me, it was a situation like, you got to understand, I've been at this for a long time, and the thrill of getting a chance to meet, not only all these other doctors that were in our PhDs that were there, but to actually meet a guy who was running a government program that was dealing in aerial phenomena like this, and then also to meet Hal Putoff, who's got incredible history with this kind of like this stuff, plus, other kinds of things, remote viewing and so on and so forth. It was like, my dreams fulfilled.
I bet.
So anyway, and I grew up in Project Blue Book, so I had a chance to even meet Hector Quintanilla and some of the other people at the base, and I interacted with the people in Project Blue Book.
So you're talking about Right Pat then?
Oh yeah,
Okay.
I grew up in Dayton, Ohio, and
Okay.
right path. But again, for me, it's like I got started as a little 13-year-old kind of kid, and then the next thing I know is now here I am. I'm going to be 67 or I'm 67.
You're just a kid.
I'm still just a kid, and now I get this get to meet these other people, and I was just thrilled to death. But anyway, so Lou volunteered to come, and what a great guy. I mean, I just want to tell you, this has been a joy for me to be able to meet Lou. First off, you have to understand that I work, again, in support of Army and Army soldiers, right?
Right.
So you care for the country. You care for the defense of the country, and that's what your job's about, right? I happen to work in IT security, cybersecurity, and so, that's the world that I live in. And Lou, of course, worked in the Department of Defense and also came up through the Army ranks and stuff. So, and he was also in the intel world. But anyway, what a man of character, integrity, and honor. And it was just fabulous to see his level of integrity. And I'm a good read on people to know that if he's blowing me smoke or if he's telling me the truth. And we had nothing but honest conversations the whole weekend, not only just with me, but everybody that was in that room. And everybody walked away just getting to know the guy and love him, and it's really see how much integrity that this man has. He's not going to lie. Now, he's obviously also concerned about clearance, and we all are. We want to keep clearances or protected information, and we all learn about that day in and day out over at the Arsenal. We have to go through all kinds of training classes about that type of stuff. So I honor the fact that he can't tell me everything. He worked in a different place, but bottom line was, what he can tell me, he's pretty doggone direct, and I put him through the gristmill in terms of questions we got from the audience. You know, I
Well,
mean,
just real quick, let me jump in here and ask. You're running a scientific organization, and it's all about gathering data. The military has the best data, and they tend not to give it up. Do you see that breaking down anytime soon, or is it going to stay like this? It's always going to be, a video gets leaked here, a video gets leaked there. Maybe you get a bit of a tip from somebody, and a FOIA can be filed. It's very tedious work, just getting bits and pieces, crumbs here and there, to try to piece these stories together.
Well, I think that there's some elements of that. For example, when you talk about the government having the data, let me also clarify that the government, but it's also contractors and defense contractors that have the data. Okay, so when we go to talk with the government, a lot of times the government person is in charge of a program, and the program consists of a whole bunch of contractors through whatever means. And so really the data is probably out at Lockheed Martin, or the data is at other locations. And when you talk to a program manager, they don't know about what's going on out there at the base, or the level of data. They know just they're bureaucrats. They keep a program going. They maybe help out with the money, or they do briefings to senior leaders or something of that nature, and that's pretty much about it, right?
Right.
So, I mean, I'm not going to go to Lou Elizondo and ask a whole lot of physics questions, because he's not a physicist, right?
Sure.
I mean, when I look at Lou Elizondo, he's more in the role of a bureaucrat, like many of them, running a program. And so, we always want to jump up and ask Lou, hey, what about this? What about that? And, he's going to have to rely on what he got from his contractor, which might have been Bigelow or somebody else that's actually doing all the work. So, when we say, well, we get the data is out in the contracting world and possibly out with Lockheed Martin. So why aren't we going to the Lockheed Martin and say we want the data? And the other part of that is that I would also say to you that so scientists out there are looking at the data. They're coming up with something, and they're being able to figure out how they can leverage that for the defense of our country. And so, we don't want to give away secrets. In fact, we're very concerned about the fact that right now that the Chinese are actually capturing all of our information on our R&D networks or something of that nature, and they're basically over there recreating everything that we're putting together on our plans.
Or maybe even jumping ahead of us if they're a little bit more efficient.
So we wonder why there's a UAV that looks amazingly like a UAV that we've got on the drawing table over in China. Well, guess what? So you have to be closed lips a little bit. You have to be very, very cautious about what you say. And so openness, completely open, is like opening your kimono to letting the enemy know everything you're doing or whatever it is. And so why would you do that, Frank?
Understood.
Yeah.
But let me jump in here again and say that as far as some of these hot cases that come in from UFOs, and I'm guessing, the Nimitz case didn't even happen while Elizondo was running ATIP. It predated that. He must have been doing something. I mean, they must have been getting cases in.
Yeah, I'm sure that they were collecting information. To me, it would be like, if I set up a project in the DoD and I said, okay, well, first I've got to what am I going to do? I want to collect data. Okay, I want to collect data on what? I want to collect data on UFOs. Now I got to go out and educate the entire Navy or all those different players that I'm here to play, and I want you to send this kind of data to this location. Okay, so you got that. You have to stand up, whatever you're going to do in the terms of a contract. You got to make arrangements for them to go out and study things. So OSAP came up, and it basically, was put together in such a way, and then Bigelow ends up winning it, and then eventually the ATIP it narrows down the entire scope of the OSAP program into something that was more meaningful. And so Lou comes in. He's now, it's been running for a period of time. He doesn't know necessarily all the information, I guess, has to figure that out. and they keep getting information, and somebody out there like either the Bigelow has got analysts, or they got some other people that's helping to do that on contract, or they send stuff out to Sandia National Laboratory, or they send stuff within the DoD world, and get a whole bunch of head smart people to help take a look at that. And then, so I mean, this is the kind of thing that we would do where we are in the DoD right now. We would go out to all of our wonderful labs that we've got around the country and say, here, help us figure this out. So now you got scientists engaged, and they're probably feeding back information to the program. And the program manager is now getting this and trying to make sense out of what he's getting. And then he's out there trying to deal with helping to inform leadership of what's going on. He's doing routine briefings and trying to keep them at bay. At the same time, he's, and that's what he would be doing. I mean, would be collecting all that stuff and kind of like running the program, and and working with different partners and players and stuff like that. And so that data would then analyzed, and then the analysis results would go to the Pentagon, not necessarily all the data, but the analysis of that would go
reports and summary reports.
Right. And so you take the summary reports, and those are the kinds of things that you talk about with senior leaders, right? Senior leaders not going to want to get into looking and scrutinize through, realms of data. It's the analysts that would do that, and so that would not have been done by the people necessarily at the Pentagon, because they're all bureaucrats, unless they're contractors there and they're doing some things for different projects. But bottom line is, I think that this was, just I think it's a small kind of program that was being run, and all the outliers, or all the different people that were out there that were the defense contractors doing all the work, which is, by the way, exactly what's going on right now where I'm working.
Right. So he obviously became aware of the Nimitz case. Did he give you any kind of feel for other cases coming across his desk? He says that there are other even better cases, or cases that are just as good, and he didn't give a specific number, but there are at least some of them. I think one of the questions that he was asked related to frequency of these types of things. Did he give you much of a feel for that? How often is this happening?
Yeah, so that's kind of like one of the questions that was also asked of him was like, are these things frequent? How frequent are they, and that type of thing? And I think that, and there was also some questions that we got about like, can you predict these things? Can you predict? Are they predictable? Do we have any kind of tools to be able to predict them? And I think that what I got out of that was the answer was no, and that the frequency is whenever they get data provided to them, and he didn't specify anything like a time frame. I'm sure it's probably similar to Blue Book in the context of you have high periods and then you have low periods, and again, it's a situation where if they did receive these reports, it was probably along the line of somebody going out to make sure that they were collecting the data and then spending time on the data. Because look at us. We spent over a year looking at the data, right? Over a year looking at
You're talking about the Aguadilla case.
Yeah, and the Nimitz case. We spent over a year and a half. Scientists don't move at the rate that everybody out there on the internet wants us to. Right. We spend time analyzing this thing to the gnat's bippy, if you would. Pardon me. But I mean, what I'm saying? It's like we're going to analyze it and do that. So if you think about that in the context of the things that they're getting, you'd hope that they would be going through and doing a lot of analysis before they come out and say anything.
And
right?
Not only analysis of the case in general, but how did the gear respond that they're using? Obviously we've got a report from the Princeton with Kevin Day operating the radar. Apparently that radar was working fine. Fravor's saying that his radar didn't work so well and he was much closer. Why is that? Those seem to be, at least from a defense standpoint, maybe not necessarily of all that great an interest to the UFO buffs, but to those guys, I would think that would be right. That would be one question that would be right on the top of my list if I could put myself in one of their pair of shoes for a moment.
Yeah, and I think that one of the things that came out of this weekend, it was that both Hal and Lou left very, very impressed, okay, and very much willing to work with SCU on doing what we do. And So that was encouraging, and I think that very strongly we're going to be, probably helping in some capacity, whether we're just a think tank to be able to look at things or what, but we'll be able to help with that equation. So that's one thing that the whole weekend, I think that for me was the most significant, was that that it looks like we might be able to have a working relationship, maybe able to help look at some of the data that maybe that falls on TTSA or that they somehow acquire. And we're hoping that that's the case, that maybe we can help out with some of that analysis, similar to what you would do with Sandia Labs or some other labs around the country.
Or at the very least, they'll get you on their new TV show that's coming out. I think in May is the last I've heard.
Yeah, so that's going to be. Lou alluded to that at the conference, and I guess it was just announced prior to the fact that he was coming here that was going to happen. And he basically said to me that it would, this is really, really going to be good. There's going to be a lot of good stuff come out of it. And I think that, again, he's very, very serious. I think we're going to be learning a lot about him. We're going to be learning a lot about, the program. I think we're going to be learning a lot about just where they're trying to go and what they're trying to do, even with TTSA, and that it goes well beyond just this, educational thing, that they're actually going to be doing some really, really good stuff.
Well, I hope they go deep. I hope they go deep on the science. I don't know if you want to get much into the materials. I don't recall him talking too much about it during the presentation. That's a really interesting subject. They say that they have a few things in hand that has got their attention. They're not the only ones holding some interesting material that's under study, and it's a phenomenon that does go, a part of the phenomenon that goes back a little ways. So it'll be really interesting, and you know what? There'll be a lot of kids out there, and maybe back when we were kids, it might have been Star Trek that got some people fired up, and maybe these guys can do the same kind of thing for the kids who are going to be scientists towards the middle and latter part of this century. I mean, I'm hoping that is the net result of this, that we all get better as a result of this entire UFO phenomenon. And it kind of breaks the imagination out a little bit, gets some folks thinking outside the box and maybe solving some problems. I'd like to see that.
Well, Frank, one of the things that I want to brag about a little bit here on the conference, one of the things we did was we actually had, we're not out to make a profit on this thing. In fact, I'll be lucky if I get maybe $200 out of the whole thing. But
understood.
But what I'm trying to share with you is we used every bit of this. We had people that couldn't come, we had that couldn't make it, and so guess what we did? We took it and gave gratis tickets to students at universities.
There you go.
And so we brought them in, and so we had. At the conference, I was able to introduce the two engineering types of students that we had, one from University of Alabama and engineering, and then at the same time, another one at University of Alabama, Birmingham. And so we got to start with the young people, and they can't afford to come, and so let's get some students. So that's what we did.
And did they do any contributing, or were they just kind of sitting there with their eyes wide open and their ears wide open as well?
Oh, well, they were very active in conversations. They didn't sit back, but they didn't present anything. But they certainly, they were engaged and engaging the presenters left and right. So that's precisely what we were trying to accomplish, is to get young scientists, if you would, engaged. And we want to continue that even if we do this again next year.
And do you have anything more in the pipeline as far as any kind of hot cases that you guys are looking at now? You don't have to give anything away, but do you have anything in the pipeline that maybe a few months or a year down the road you're going to release it and we're going to say, wow?
Well, I think that there's something that's going to be coming up in the next 8 weeks or so that we were told that might come our way, and if that does pan out, then I think we're going to be having another conversation with some very dramatic stuff, because this is actually a military case with witnesses and a whole bunch of other stuff. So if that pans out, then we could be having another conversation there and delivering results. And I'm very excited. I think that What I'm starting to see is more of an engagement again with scientific ufology, which I think that we want to promote. And we need to have conversations. I mean, this one was dedicated to more like physical sciences, like rocket propulsion and space and that type thing. Well, there's just an equal footing that ought to go on with, and I'm sure that it is, but with consciousness kinds of work and other kinds of things. But and I'm hoping
the social scientists, they'll be jumping in too if this gets much traction. You know that it's a social phenomenon. Nobody can deny that. And there has been some work in the past, and I'm sure more is on the way from the social scientists.
Yeah, and so somebody had mentioned on Facebook that it's like I was counter to that. Well, I'm not personally counter. I think that scientists have a tendency to look at it as being, out of their league, and they, like we had, people at the conference were asking, well, what about consciousness, this or that? And, they were asking Lou. Well, Lou hasn't engaged in that, and
Right.
I can't go to a propulsion scientist and expect him to talk about consciousness. So we, had to put some of those conversations aside and say, well, we can't address that here.
Right.
Yeah,
you didn't have the right lineup, but I think you could probably, if you wanted to focus on that, it probably wouldn't be that difficult because there are plenty of good scientists who are on this and very much interested in it.
Correct, and I think that those kind of conversations are probably going on at other venues with other organizations, and so I don't, to me, this is like heavily focused on getting the physical sciences engaged, if you would, right now. That's our primary focus, and kind of like where we're trying to go, because guess what? They haven't really been engaging with us for a very, very long time.
Well, why do you think that is, Rich? Do you think it's the John Mack effect and the problems he had at Harvard? Why do you think they've stayed away from it? Because I've seen documentaries where they've got loads of science. Oh, I watched Star Trek when I was a kid, or it was the science fiction. Well, here's maybe some science fact. Well, there is some science fact behind the UFO phenomenon. Let's not kid ourselves here. I don't want to beat around the bush and equivocate. There's science facts surrounding this phenomenon. What do you think has held them back? Is it just stigma? The stigma attached?
Well, that's certainly one thing. I mean, you can't go to like some of the UFO conventions or some. I'm not going to specify which ones, but ultimately you can go to some of them, and it's like a bunch of people that are wearing spacesuits or something like that,
right,
dressed as aliens, and so they see that, and they, it's like the stigma associated is horrible, and why would I want to do that? And then the other part of the equation is that, scientists want data. If ufologists cannot give them data, they have nothing to study. So, our job is, as ufologists, if you would, is if there is a phenomenon, then we have to go help them get data that they can do something with, because that's what science is about. And so ultimately, it comes back to the ufologist, who's got to have the help to be able to get the data that we need. And I'm not talking about, let me give you an example, okay? So what have we dealt with for, like, if you look at those MUFON cases that I've talked about,
right?
The vast majority of them are eyewitness testimony, and they're stories. I saw and they're stories. Occasionally, you'll get a blurry photo. All right. So to a scientist, the eyewitness testimony is completely ruled out, because it's not data. It's some sort of data, but it certainly it's not a part of your proof. And so consequently, an eyewitness can say this or can say that. Even in the Aguadilla case, we talk with witnesses. They don't care about that. They're only concerned about what's on the video.
Right.
And so you got to, or what's in the radar. And that's what scientists do. So it behooves us as ufologists to be able to get not only just our little cameras out there, but hey, let me give you an example of what you can do. You can take your phone now, and you've got tools on cell phones to be able to look at magnetometer readings. You're able to take a look at gravitometer readings. You're able to look at a whole slew of other kinds of things where you can get data. There's an app called Theodolite, That's what you should be taking your photos with. Of the witnesses should be,
Theodolite, like
yeah,
like a ground, like that ground-based theodolite.
yeah, exactly.
Okay, okay.
Theodolite. And why? Because guess what? When you take that photo, it's got a whole bunch of metadata. It's actually got the angle in the sky that you took the photo. It's got the GPS coordinates in it. It's all on the screen on the photo. Okay, so you got GPS location.
It's part of the EXIF data then, basically, for that particular photo.
Yeah, you not only the EXIF data, but there's a whole bunch of metadata is what I'm trying to get at. Okay. There's a whole bunch of data that goes along with the photo. So now you can get angular size, you can get the location in the sky. It was precisely at the 30-degree mark or the 33-degree mark above the horizon. You've got the GPS location. It's got the angle that I'm looking at, my position, and you can start to do trigonometry with it. Okay, now if you started using photos or taking photos of objects using something like a theodolite and providing that instead of the other stuff, then we might be able to do something with it. But the problem is, you go out and say to a witness, well, can you tell me how much of an angle that the object would fit in the sky? Was it the size of a dime held at arm's length like the Air Force used to have, or was it that? And they're just all speculating and guessing.
Right.
Well, how big is a car? Can you tell me the size of the length of your car? Well, how big does that length of the car look when it's a mile down the road?
Right.
It's a little dot. And so now you got problems where the witnesses can't tell you data. So we got to get better data, and we need tools. Like, a good example is if you took the photograph and you put up a simple diffraction grating in front of it that actually split it into the spectrum. I have a spectrum analyzer that can allow me to tell you what the chemical composition of the object is. So now, much like we're looking on stars out there and or planets, we're using, spectral kinds of imagery and IR imagery and so on. But we're learning a lot about the chemical composition around these things. So, well, we have a couple cases like in Hesselen where they've taken spectral photography. I'm attempting to do it on an area out here about an hour away from me in Cloverdale, where there's a similar Hesselen phenomena here in Alabama. And then we're geared to take spectral photographs there. We got infrared cameras and a whole bunch of other things we're trying to apply. We even have drones we're using. And we're going to be trying to attempt to fly drones up next to some objects out there. But my point is that, you get that kind of data that you now can give to a scientist. Well, guess what? That can work wonders, and it's going to help us to solve things.
Got it.
All right.
Fantastic. And I'm going to wrap things up. But let me ask you before, is there anything that we didn't touch on that you want to get out there?
No, other than just the fact that, I hope that people will, keep, number one, an open mind, and then hope that people will consider, Lou is trying to come out and give us a whole bunch of stuff, and he needs to. I mean, people beat him up a lot, and okay, and they parse his words, and all I would just say to you is, God, I've been looking for this kind of data to come out for a long time, and now we don't want to shut the source down. So a little bit of civility and friendliness on the internet would be nice from time to time, and oh, by the way, we need to leverage what we've got in the way of a lot of people who have an interest in science and get head smart about doing something in a smart way with ufology, as opposed to, just all complaining about this or parsing out people's words on whatever, So,
well, yeah, I mean, I'm not a Lou Elizondo or a TTSA basher, but it's gotten a little slow. I mean, he admitted himself the last 6 months have been a little bit slow. I think probably a little bit longer than the last 6 months. But the show's coming out, so I'm assuming you're going to be watching the show as well. I know I will be.
Oh, sure. I'm going to definitely be watching it. And I watched, let me put it to you this, because I know that, Frank, you also said the same kind of thing, but oh God, we're gonna have this thing called Project Blue Book. It's gonna talk about, all this wonderful stuff about Blue Book. And then you go turn on the first show and you say, well, wait a minute, that doesn't look like anything like that case happened. And
I got pretty excited when it buzzed the football stadium, which did actually happen. But after that,
Well, exactly. So you go through that, like, and how many times has that happened to ufologists over the years? And it's like we've, alien autopsies, and we've had all these disappointments. And I think that, we're also, dead set, well, this is on a History Channel. It's going to be another one of those things. I'd say keep an open mind on all of them and just wait and let's see. And I watched the Blue Book show with a lot of humor because I consider it an X-Files show. That's all it is to me. And it's not about accuracy. I wouldn't put it in the context that it's doing a lot of good for ufology. But anyway, I'm hoping that, and I really believe that what he's got coming up will be really, really benefit us big time. And I trust Lou when he says that. So I'm going to watch it. I'm very excited about it, and we'll go with it as best we can.
I hope they go deep on the science. I think that is the key. At
Lou,
least for me, anyway. That's what I'm hoping for.
If anything came out of this conference, Lou is dead set on science. And Hal is in agreement with that, too. You wouldn't have Hal at this conference if it wasn't including science.
Got it. Well, Rich, this was fantastic. The hour and a half just flew by. Thank you so much for doing this. And let's stay in touch. Let me keep us all up to date on what you guys at the SCU are doing. And also, obviously, we'll maybe when the show finally comes on, we'll kick around a post-mortem on that as well. Thank you so very much. I appreciate it.
Oh, thank you for having me, Frank. I appreciate it very much on my end, too.
Absolutely. Good night, everybody. I think we're going to be back on Sunday with the one and only Dave Scott. You have a good one. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye now.